Welcome to EduPlanet 21's 10-Minute Tuesdays, a series of conversations with experts in education. We'll be speaking with authors of our PLUS content pathways to provide educators with actionable information in bite-sized pieces. My name is Claire Coop-Scott, and I'm with EduPlanet 21's content team. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Bena Kallick, co-director of the Institute for Habits of Mind and chief strategic advisor at EduPlanet 21. Bena provides services to school districts, state departments of education, professional organizations, and public agencies throughout the U.S. and abroad. Boy, that's a mouthful, Bena. You do a lot. She's co-authored many books with topics that include habits of mind, assessment, and personalized learning. Bena, welcome to our podcast. This is our first one, our first interview with our authors.
Oh, well, that's very exciting. Thank you. I hope I'll be able to give nice little chunks.
All right, great. So today I thought we'd start with an introduction to habits of mind and talk a little bit about how educators can get started. Does that sound good to you?
Sure, sounds fine.
All right, so let's start with the basic. What are the habits of mind?
Okay. Well, it's really interesting too, Claire, because these habits have been around. Art Costa and I developed these habits of mind based on research that we had done in emotional intelligence, cognitive psychology, looking at social and emotional learning. And we did this over 30 years ago.
Wow.
And I know. And, I was only 10 at the time.
I was going to say, you were very young at the time.
But anyway, we did this work, and it's what I think is so exciting about it is how classic it is, because over all the years, so many things have changed. I try to keep up with everything. As you mentioned, I'm certainly now deeply involved with personalized learning. However, the habits are pretty much constant. Now, how they situate themselves is a little bit different. So the first thing I say is that the habits are a set of dispositions. So we named 16 dispositions, and that's not the entire universe of dispositions, but we felt as we read all the literature and did our research, they just kept popping up over and over again. And many of them won't be a surprise to anyone. For example, persisting. Now, I don't think that that's a surprise to anyone, but notice how classic it is in the sense that you needed to persist when you were doing a more industrial model of education, and you need to persist now that you're involved in a more challenging and kind of contemporary look at education. So persisting is one.
A lot of teachers talk about grit, and would you say persistence is equal with grit or part of grit?
Yeah, I think that the work that Duckworth did in studying grit, what she was really doing was doing research to say specifically what motivates someone, what helps them to stick with something. So that just added to our research around the question of persisting, and persisting, perseverance, grit, all the same thing. But what's interesting about it is that these habits, they're the attitudes, the dispositions you have for being a successful learner in the world, that these habits really grow over time, and they change depending on the situation. So for example, you might say persisting. Well, persisting is really important. However, if you continue to persist too long and things aren't working, I would say you're probably on the edge of stubborn. So the question is, how do you begin to think about this and say to yourself, if this isn't working, what can I do to persist but not keep doing the same thing over and over? So another habit comes to mind. And you say, well, maybe this is a time when I should be thinking flexibly. Try something else. See if it works. See what works for you. So one of the things that we talk about these attitudes, these dispositions is they're thoughtful behaviors also. And one of the things that we suggest in building the habit is one of the strongest ones probably in the literature, which is metacognition. Being aware of your thinking, knowing that you're thinking about these things, and being more aware and more conscious of how you're managing yourself, which is why a lot of the habits lead to self-direction, to taking responsibility for yourself as a learner, and for taking responsibility for other people when they're disturbing you, having the voice to be able to say, hey, I don't think we're listening to each other with understanding and empathy. Let's really stop what we're doing right now and tune into each other. So you begin to get the value of them as you practice them and as you grow the habit.
If a teacher's brand new to habits of mind, what would you suggest in terms of their approach? Should they learn it all themselves and then work with their students on the habits? Or is it something that is a journey that they can go on together with their students?
Well, that's a great question. And right now, what I find so interesting is that people used to say things like, well, if only the kids would behave better, the world would be a better place. And we sometimes forget that we're the models of that better behavior. And if we can't do it, it's going to be hard for us. It's going to be hard for them. So my general feeling is that when they do it simultaneously, it's really the best model. So for example, I'm working with a school now where I love this one. This is a 7th grade science teacher. And the school, it's a middle school, and they decided every teacher was going to choose one habit to work on, one that they felt was like a stretch goal. I could get better at it. And they were also going to choose one habit for the students to work on based on their curriculum and which one they felt was really like the most critical right now. Now, it's hard to choose one because every time you choose one, all 16 look good. But
Right.
they decided they were going to just choose one and commit to it. So what they did was they decided to do this, and I went in and interviewed this 7th grade science teacher. And I said, so tell me a little bit about it. Which one did you choose for your students? And she said, well, we're doing the new standards for science, NSS standards for science right now. And when we're doing that, central to everything that we're doing is inquiry, because that's what they're really saying is the most important thing in science, to get the students to be curious. Not that it's not important in everything, but certainly that's what she was focused on. And so she said, I'm going to choose questioning and posing problems as the habit I'd like our kids to really get used to doing. I want them to generate questions, because out of those questions, we'll begin to investigate in a deeper way. I said, okay, I understand that. And which one did you choose for yourself? And she said, I chose for myself managing impulsivity. So I kind of smiled and I said, well, that's funny. I wouldn't have anticipated that response. Tell me about it. And she said, well, I realize that if I say to the kids, I want them to start generating questions, and I give them some time to do it, and they're not doing it the way I really think it ought to be done best, and I start to want to push it because time is getting close and I have to know the bell's going to ring soon, I have to learn how to really say to myself, if I mean for them to do it, I have to turn it over to them. And managing my impulsivity is going to be a big issue. So it kind of says that these are the ways that we can think about how it interacts. When we're having a conference with a student, listening with understanding and empathy is going to be as important as questioning and posing problems. So how do you work on those two so that you're really listening closely to what the student has to say? And then that gives the student the opportunity to have voice and to say, here's what's on my mind and here's what I'm thinking. So that interactive communication kind of thing is really a set that you would do when you're worrying about feedback, formative assessment, conferencing. They have a fit in general.
Do you have a quick tip or two that you could share with our teachers, something that they could try today or tomorrow for themselves or with their students?
Yeah, I think that the quickest tip that I can give in 2 minutes flat would be that read The Habits of Mind. I think that you can get the Habits of Mind chart plus the article from EduPlanet. I know that they have it and that they would make it possible. I would also say that if they went to the online learning, which is not the purpose of this particular view, but I think it is really very purposeful, you can begin to learn all about the habits in a very quick, easy, good way, with Art and I doing a lot of the presenting and a lot of the interaction and activities. But what it does is it helps you as a teacher to get a fluency with them, to begin to see how they work, how they play. So I certainly believe that the online learning is very powerful. And then finally, if you are just wanting to go in your classroom tomorrow and try something, I would read the article, look at the habits and choose one and just start with the kids and say, okay, today, because we are going to be doing something that really requires questioning and posing problems, I'm going to do a T-chart. And on the T-chart, I'm going to say, Here's what it looks like, and here's what it sounds like. So what it looks like when you're questioning, let's just talk about that. What kinds of questions would we want to be asking? What would it look like to ask some good questions? What do we know about questioning? And then on the other side, let's see what it sounds like. What might I say? What kinds of things could I do that would indicate that I'm really interested in asking questioning? In other words, keep inviting the students to co-create the opportunities. And I think that's the best way to get started.
Great. Well, thank you, Bena. I'm looking forward to another conversation where we can talk a little bit more about the grade levels and the habits of mind.